It's been a year. It's only been a year since I made my first, involved YouTube video. I say that like I've made many this year. When the world first shut down, I think a lot of people assumed that this would be a time that we would all just really hold on tight and find that inner creative spark inside of ourselves and really go after that hobby or that one thing that we've been wanting to do and just really just nail it. And the next thing you know it's not April anymore. It's July. And then, oh wait, it's October. If existential dread is new to you, I'm genuinely sorry. That sucks. It's not fun. You know what, I don't recommend it, but as someone who has kind of lived in it to a degree for some time, I thought I might share not exactly a ghost story or a horror story, or let's call it an anxiety story. For those out in the world right now who are saying things like, don't let fear control you, don't let fear rule you, don't let it take over your life, don't let them win, don't let them control you. And they're talking about wearing masks to go to Trader Joe's and get their orange chicken and their little Dunker cookies for their tea, but it's too much of a infringement upon their rights to put on a mask. Oh, so that Miss Susan over there, who's like 68 and still has to work because retirement's not exactly in her future, doesn't die, but they won't put on the mask so they can get their freaking chips. You know what? This is a sort of rhetoric that I've experienced for some time. As an anxious person, I have been told this before, oftentimes by well-meaning individuals from church or the internet, you know, the religious side of the internet typically. And you know what? Like I said, it's well-meaning. A lot of people tell you this thinking that if you could snap out of it, you could just stop. Just stop it. Stop being afraid.
Stop it!
Then things would be better for you. Like, why would you want to live in fear? Who would want to be anxious all the time?
So, I should just stop it.
There you go. I mean, you don't want to go through life being scared of being buried alive in a box, do you? I mean, that sounds frightening.
And you know what? That's true. I don't want to be anxious all the time. I don't want to live in fear. That's not something that I choose to do.
I can't. I mean, it's been with me since childhood.
No.
And I'm not saying that there isn't some element of choice, but there's also a certain level of misunderstanding from their end to assume that I'm sitting here choosing to be afraid.
As long as I'm in my apartment, I'm okay. But when I want to go out, I get weird. Talk about weird. Well,
I think the language around speaking of people who are anxious or nervous is pretty negative, to say the least. Are you gonna live in fear? You're gonna let that control you? Are you a coward? Are you some kind of coward? If it's not seen as a sin, it's, it's borderline in some circles, it seems. But it seems like now people are pretty open and comfortable talking about being anxious or depressed or struggling with various mental illnesses or diagnoses or their personal journey to figuring out what those things even are in their lives.
So the real question is, what is the crisis, Bob? What is it that you are truly afraid afraid of?
When I was a kid, that wasn't exactly super openly talked about. Disorders or mental illness has been often spoken about like a kind of moral failing. And when you speak about somebody who has a mental illness, you speak about them like they are crazy. Something happened to them, or just, there's just something wrong with them, or whatever.
What if my heart stops beating? What if I'm looking for a bathroom, I can't find it, and my bladder explodes?
Though you may feel crazy at some point, it doesn't look the way that it does in movies and TV, whether it's romanticized or turned into this great horrific thing. Either way, it doesn't necessarily help the rest of us, you know what I'm saying? For those of you who are not used to this, nobody's used to living like this. This is not a normal way to live. And I don't just mean the anxiety. I mean the everybody is in the same boat, generally speaking, in that this is not normal. We're kind of trying to pretend things are normal, but what is happening? It's all happening at once. But for some of us who have been experiencing anxiety personally, that's been an ongoing internal thing for quite some time. And let's talk a little bit about that. While I was homeschooled for most of my life, I did go to a public school up through the 3rd grade, and so I would ride the school bus and, go to my little elementary school. And during that time, my younger brother, John, also went to public school. He was in kindergarten, and he had made a really close friend. And that close friend had a slightly older sister. And one day, his sister and I ended up sitting together on the bus on the way home. And it came up, of course, that our brothers are friends, and, that they like to hang out together, and we didn't live that far away, obviously, riding the bus together home. And she was like, what if sometime when he comes over, you come over, and we can hang out, have a play date? And I was like, yeah, that would be awesome. I don't want to make light of the situation, and obviously my memory from being a child is different than my memory now. It's not perfect. Some details could be wrong or exaggerated based on my memory. But we never actually did hang out because one day, not too long after that point, there were a bunch of emergency vehicles that showed up at her house. We lived in a cul-de-sac, and across the cul-de-sac was their street, and we could see the fire trucks and police cars and what other emergency vehicles go to park in front of their house. And the neighborhood kids all came out and kind of gathered across, like at our corner, to look across the street and try to wonder what had happened. And later, rumors would begin to circulate, and exaggerations, and you know how kids tell things and it begins to get bigger than it really was, or more grotesque or morbid or whatever. But basically, what we do know is that she had an accident while she was playing in her backyard while her sister was on the phone, and by the time her sister found her, basically she had asphyxiated herself and she died. I remember coming home when I found out what had happened and that she was gone, and I remember crying, but crying like almost out of duty to cry, and this is gonna make me sound like a sociopath, but I just knew that I was supposed to cry. It was my first experience with someone dying, and it was a child. We were invited to her funeral, her wake, and I remember they had a point where they let the children come up to see her, and her body was in an open casket where they had candy and toys around her. And I remember looking at her body, like surrounded by like baby bottle pop and all the like the candy that was really popular at that time. and I think I brushed my fingers against her arm and felt how cold she was, and I remember just being kind of shaken to my core about the fact that a kid, like another young person like myself, could die, that it could happen. As an overthinker, a chronic overthinker, I would lie in bed at night and I would think about dying a lot. I would think about accidentally strangling myself. I would think about accidentally getting hung. I would think about the things you see on the news. Even when you're watching like a movie or some sort of program at night, they're like, coming at 11, an old man fell on a fence and stabbed himself to death or whatever, or something dramatic and crazy to get you to come back and watch the news at 11. And I would just lay in bed and be like, that could be me. I could do that to myself. It could happen tomorrow. And I don't mean to make light of some of these situations, but that's I don't know what to tell you. That's just how I was. When you're not the one experiencing the anxiety, it seems pretty crazy to other people. Sometimes the things you're afraid of do not seem very realistic or they don't seem like something that could probably actually happen to you, but to you, the person, oh my goodness, it could. You don't know that it could happen. As an adult, I'm aware that some of my fears are ridiculous, or like I tell people, like, I understand that what I'm afraid of is impractical. It's unlikely. That fear is impractical sometimes, that it's unlikely, but I still feel it. Like, I can be conscious and cognizant of these things, and yet I feel it. I'm sorry. My mom has long suffered my overthinking tendencies. As a kid, she had some difficulties getting me to go to bed because of said problems from before. I distinctly remember a time when she brought in this large painting that we had of this beautiful cliff by the ocean, and she set it in my room and she said, look at this, picture a movie, like, just stop worrying about things. And you know, I'm not a therapist or a psychologist or licensed in any way. In general, there are a couple of forms of anxiety. There's general anxiety and panic disorder, or in my own terms, panic attacks and like gripping fear. And then there's dread. Dread is being caught up at night thinking about the fact that in 8 months you're gonna have to go to the doctors and you're gonna have to get shots. It's that, oh my god, I'm gonna have to take swim lessons again, and I hate swim lessons, and I'm really bad at swimming, and she yells at me, and I think I'm gonna drown, and you know what, she might let me, or she might not see it, and what if I just can't do it and I drown, and it's like a spiral. There's that focused badness and this general, I'm just anxious and I don't know why. Kid Lauren, I mean, I kept my parents on their toes with some of those things. I thought, I mean, I was the kind of kid who read a lot of like historical literature and religious literature and thought, you know what, I'm gonna be one of those kids who just, I'm gonna die young, it's just gonna happen, I'm gonna go camping one day, and then while my Girl Scout leader and all of the other scouts are sleeping, I'm just going to be afflicted by some invisible disease and just pass off into the night. Like, I didn't tell anybody this, but these are thoughts that I had. I thought, you know what, that ferry I'm gonna take to Catalina Island, it's probably not gonna make it, so I'm gonna write my parents a goodbye letter just in case. To Catalina Island. My god, Lauren. It meant laying in bed and hearing this dramatic music from this television show my parents liked to listen to at night, where we'd go like boom, 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 and just that heartbeat just really freaking me out and hating it. And then one day finally being almost in tears and going out into the living room to see what they're watching, only for it to be Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
In the children's book series, where is Paddington Bear originally from? India.
It meant me thinking about home invaders, and me also being that, the kid with scoliosis who wears a Charleston back brace at night, and thinking, well, if he tries to stab me in this torso area, at least then I'll be safe. Probably. It's like a little stab-proof vest at a very specific angle. In case a robber wants to stab an 11-year-old girl in her bed. Logically. But as an adult, some of those anxieties that I had shifted and changed a bit. I was a lost 22-ish-year-old. I had failed the same math class 3-ish times, and that meant I was going to have to take it at another community district. I couldn't go to the one college in my Southern California area, but it also meant I couldn't go to the other 2 closest colleges. I was gonna have to leave that little trifecta area and go somewhere else, and I didn't even have my driver's license because driving terrified me. And you know what? I do have my driver's license now, but it still terrifies me, and if I can avoid driving, I do. So back to that point, I was not doing so hot. My only job really had been babysitting, and I didn't feel like I was good at anything, and clearly I'd failed multiple classes, and I was kind of just like, you know what? Things aren't going so hot for me, are they? What am I gonna do with my life? So instead, I decided to go to a ministry school. Now, I grew up as a pretty good Christian kid. My parents met at YWAM, which is a Christian youth organization in Scotland. The organization's everywhere, but they happened to meet in the one in Scotland. Since that point on, we were raised with those ideals and certain morals instilled within us, going to Sunday school, youth group, and all of that growing up. I was very involved in a lot of ways, but so was my anxiety. That was still a part of me. And as an overthinker, I often found myself getting worried about my own doubts and uncertainty about my faith. And when I would end up at places, especially like camp, they have a lot of literal come to Jesus moments and altar calls and things like that. And you know what? I went to every single one of them because I just wasn't sure that I was covered. I wasn't sure if my insurance was there. I wasn't sure, so I would do it every time because, you know what? It doesn't hurt to be too careful. So much of my overthinking, uncertain self was still what if I didn't believe hard enough last time? What if since the last time I've sinned so much that I kind of broke it?
You know how some people pull into the breakdown lane when there's traffic and they think to themselves, who cares? No one's watching. We were watching.
And I know that theologically that's not sound, but still emotionally and just etc. I just would get so wrapped up in it. And it doesn't help that at a lot of youth camps and such in general, they are very aimed at trying to really make sure they get the lost, so they really poke at you and they want you to rededicate yourself to God. And that just really resulted in myself doubting my faith even more, or doubting that it had stuck with me, and just doing it again and again.
When your time on earth has ended, we calculate the total value of your life using our perfectly accurate measuring system. Only the people with the very highest scores, the true cream of the crop, get to come here, to the good place. What happens to everyone else, you ask? Don't worry about it.
So that led me to ministry school. Ministry school can look like a lot of different things. It can look like seminary for some people, or it can look like a program that is part-time, where you go 2 nights a week and you learn from some great, impressive ministry leaders who teach you various things from the Bible and books that they've written, and there's worship, and you end it with a certificate that really doesn't mean much except for to you personally, and I guess other people who run in those circles. And that's the one that I did, personally. Yes. So I went to the East Coast to do this. I was excited and scared, but excited mostly about leaving California and doing something. I was like gonna do something different, and I'm like, if this doesn't prove my faith and help me know more about myself, then like what will? But then, sometime in the fall, like a couple, 3 months into the program, something bad happened again. A young man in the program who was from India and who was planning on leading a mission trip to India and had all these great ideals and hopes, and had spoken at our group, and who I had met just the one time but had seen regularly, was in a fatal car accident, and he died. I was pretty shook. This was not a very big program. Think like under 100 people. Think like under 70 people. I'm not entirely sure exactly how many, but regardless, even if there was 1,000 people, it's still really shocking and sad. It was a moment where, again, I was made aware that just tragedy can just hit out of nowhere. And like during that time, I had been really trying to root myself in believing that if I do the X, Y, Z right thing, then I'm protected. Like, I've got my insurance, I'm set. And I'm watching this happen, and selfishly, or I don't know, I'm having this experience of realizing that the bad things can happen to anybody, which is such an obvious statement, I realize, but it was still really shocking and sad. And then not that long after that, I went to go stay with my aunt for Thanksgiving in New York City, which was really cool. We were visiting the 9/11 memorial. I don't know if you've visited that before, but it's 2 giant pools in the shape of where the buildings used to be, and it's like these vortexes of just like emptiness, and it's like a memorial. You're supposed to think and really reflect, and there were people in the line while we were waiting to get in to look at it that were talking about stories they'd heard of people jumping out of the building, and I'm trying not to listen to them, but there's nowhere else for me to go, and I'm getting kind of a little freaked out, or a little like, I'm just like, this is just a lot to be listening to right now. Like, the air is already really sad and tragic, and I'm like, I don't want, like, I want to be respectful, but I don't want to, like, absorb that right now, because it's not helpful for me right now. At some point, I got a call from one of the people I was living with at that time. I was living with a whole group of friends, new, and one friend from my home church who had come with me from California to this program, and he had been having an even more difficult time adjusting and dealing with life as we know it. And I got the call that he had apparently tried to kill himself, and I then experienced, to my knowledge, my first really strong panic attack. Like, I suddenly couldn't breathe, and my palms were sweaty, and like everything, I just got dizzy, and like my heart was beating like crazy, and I thought I was gonna have a heart attack. I had to sit down and call my parents to calm down, and my aunt like had no idea what to do, and understandably so. But like, that was just the beginning. After that point, it was very easy to trigger that sort of response in me. Like, if I began to have a spiral about anything that I was anxious about, if I like suddenly breathed a little bit shallow, or I noticed that my palm was kind of sweaty or whatever, I would begin to worry that I was having one, and then it would trigger one. But I didn't even know what it was that I was having, or what the heck was going on with me. Like, I had no idea what a panic attack was, and nobody I lived with or knew what it was either. I remember wondering if I was possessed by a demon, or if I had some horrible like heart problem or internal disease that just hadn't been discovered yet. I went to the doctors, a clinic really, because I didn't have the money to go to like a full doctor's visit, and I remember them kind of being like, "You're fine, it's good," and I just remember that season being so stressful that at one point I was just crying, and I just couldn't stop crying because I was just so exhausted with being scared all the time, and with just not being able to explain what was going on with me, and that uncertainty and that like dread, and it drained me. And just being around people who didn't know how to help me or what to do, and even people, well-meaning people, and people who loved me, and people who, were my friends, but nobody knew how to help me. And, I was convinced that something was horribly wrong with me, and I was going to die. And it was just really, really hard. I remember, like, it was so bad at some point that, like, making any sort of decisions for myself would cause like a miniature panic attack. Like, it would just make me spiral out because I was just so afraid of making the wrong choice, like whatever the wrong choice was, and screwing up my life, that I'd like be so overcome with indecision that I just couldn't handle it.
How do you know?
I don't. But the minute I said that, you knew instinctively whether it felt right.
Well, hang on. Let me think about that.
No!
Because
No more thinking, Chidi. Just do something.
I wanted other people to tell me what to do with my life. I wanted God to tell me what to do with my life. I wanted the right answer, so I could just do the right thing and just, and just be okay. And that just wasn't happening. I think for some people, what that thing is, whether it's the right thing, but like that core part of you. For others of us, we like a lot of things and we have no clue. Welcome to the club. Yeah, I don't think there was a distinct ending to that season of my life, but I do remember that between all of the calls to my parents and the moments of me in the back room at my work listening to worship music, or reading the Psalms, or journaling, or crying, or trying to sleep, or all sorts of things, I eventually found that for me, I had to kind of pump the brakes on the ways that I would spiral. Once I had a language for what was happening for myself, this is a panic attack, this is anxiety, this is not a heart attack, this is a panic attack. Like, once you have that sort of language, or that sort of ability to recognize those certain points that are happening in your life, like, that kind of knowledge is, it is power, because then you can say, this is a panic attack. What I'm experiencing is a panic attack. Not that that's a magic cure or anything, but instead of going, oh my god, I'm having a panic attack, oh my god, I go, okay, that thing, I'm gonna distract myself from that thing. Whatever that thing is that I'm afraid of, Yeah, distract myself. Is it the healthiest thing in the world to do? I don't know. But if I can watch a YouTube video or play The Sims or do something else instead of having a panic attack, I'll do that. I kind of can't help but go back to that idea of like, don't let it control you, don't live in fear. You hear people say that now about wearing masks, as I was saying before, but people would say that about anxiety and such as well, like it's a choice. And I don't think it always is a choice. For some of us, it can feel like gaslighting. And I think to a degree it is. It's not always intentional, but it still exists. When I was a kid, in Sunday school one day, we were given little like dog tag bracelets, which were very trendy at the time. And each one had a little Bible verse inscribed in it. And mine so happened to be this bracelet, which says, "Fear not." And fear not is what the angels tell people whenever they have an encounter with them. They say, "Fear not, don't be afraid." And understandably, that's because the angelic beings were quite terrifying and probably not very human. But it was something that I wore for myself for a long time, kind of to serve as a reminder not to allow myself to fall into fits of panic or anxiety, though, you know what, it's still an ongoing journey for me. For those of us that are new to this feeling of like dread and stress and being told by other people around you not to live in fear, and being told by other people that, you know, you're being paranoid or you're freaking out for no reason and or whatever, like, it's, you know what, it's a very real feeling. But I'm here to say, especially right now, that those fears are valid. I'm sorry that they are, but they are. We have to do what we can to stop the spread and to prevent COVID from entering these circles in our, whether it's in our families or friends or the circles and the bubbles that go in and out. Like, the most that we can do for the people in our lives by staying home and when we can, washing our hands, wearing a mask, staying 6 feet apart from people, like, that's a way of protecting so many countless lives out there. Even when you are doing everything, that like dread and stress over knowing that so many people are not doing what they're supposed to be doing and that they are putting other people's lives and your life at risk, or that like depression or stress over not being able to do things that you just miss doing, like that tension that you carry in your body, you know what, that's very real and very valid. Like, I carry a lot of tension in my body, like I get it here and I get it, like, you know, your body just gets all stiff because you're just so tense. And like, yeah, it sucks that this year has been the way that it's been. But Halloween and other holidays, they don't have to actually be canceled. There are things that we can do for ourselves and for the rest of us by choosing to stay home and watch movies, by doing Zoom calls and etc. And I know that that probably doesn't sound that exciting anymore. It's October, it's not March. But the more that we can do on our own in a socially distant way, the better off we will be. I've said before that a lot of Gothic literature and movies and TV center around being deceived by your eyes and ears. It's that kind of trick the light, that uncertainty that, are you actually seeing a spirit, or does your candle just flicker weird? Is that like some sort of ghoul, or do you just have really poor ventilation in your house? There is a truth to the fact that fear does look different at night than it does in the day. Right now we're in the nighttime stage of COVID. We are in the 11th hour. We are maybe past it. Things don't look so hot. The presidential election, things just, you know what, everything, it just all looks bad. We're just at a point where everything seems pretty bleak. When I wasn't really feeling up to making more in-depth videos this past year, whether it was because I was just too busy with work or just really not feeling those creative juices, I decided to film a couple of short videos about my guinea pigs. Partly because I'd actually seen Jenna Marbles do something similar with her dogs as kind of a visual ASMR, like peaceful sort of thing, and I thought, you know what, I'll do that with my guinea pigs. But when I took the 3 of them to the vet, I was told that they all had varying levels of an upper respiratory infection, which for guinea pigs can be somewhat of a death sentence. And I was given antibiotics for all of them. And over the course of a month, with at least 4 more vet visits in between, I lost all 3 of them, one by one, about every 2 weeks, until all that was left was Buttercup, my mom's guinea pig. She died on the anniversary of when I had adopted them. We had just adopted a young guinea pig to be her new companion, named Luna. It was really difficult. I don't mean to undermine any of the many human lives that were lost during this year. But if you have not held a pet when they have gone through the process of dying, I don't recommend it to one degree because it's really terrible, and to another degree, you know, being there for them for as long as you can be there for them, you know, that's the kindest, most humane thing that I can think of. But to give a picture of like what we assumed would happen versus what would happen, like I had purchased Buttercup a Halloween costume. We had plans, like this was not an assumed thing whatsoever. It was very expensive and very sad. A series of unfortunate events. I think sometimes this year, or in general, you can just feel like life just keeps giving you blow by blow by blow by blow. And it's just like, it's emotionally exhausting. It's not a wonder that we would rather see like our fears as a person with a mask and a chainsaw, because this invisible, ongoing like pain is just sometimes so difficult to live with. It's like the slow impending doom sometimes. That's just it. It's just a lot. I don't know of anybody that's been thriving during this time. I'm gonna say that my work has been fine. I'm lucky in that sake. But I don't know of anybody that's like doing super hot that isn't actively pretending that the quarantine or the pandemic's not happening. Like, there's a difference between saying you're not gonna live in fear and then actively ignoring the situation at hand. But sometimes those two things seem to go hand in hand by the people that say them. Sometimes it doesn't feel like this season's going to be over. It will be. It may not be over tomorrow, but eventually the darkness is going to give way to the dawn. Anxiety has to hit like a breaking point where this fear, this dread, like either you control it or it controls you. And I do not mean that in a condescending way. If that's how it came across, I'm sorry. But I mean, if you ignore this side of you, if you ignore this dread, this fear, this numbness, this sadness for too long, eventually it's going to hit you. And when it does, it's not going to be pretty. you might need to take time off, kind of, not pretty. Take care of yourself. Because, like, if you don't, these things do hit you. And they hit hard. I'm very familiar with the living in fear side of things, but, like, for those of us that aren't, and who are just too busy and too, like, you know, they have blinders on and they're like, you know what, I'm just gonna pretend it's not happening. Like, I get it. I understand distracting yourself when you're afraid or you're not sure what to do, but, like, at some point you have to look inward and deal with yourself. Like, deal with some things that you're afraid of, and just, you know, when you have the chance, I very much recommend dealing with some of that, because otherwise you begin to take it out on other people and on yourself and on your work and on just so much. It's just not worth it. Sometimes it's time to distract yourself so you can sleep, listen to podcasts, listen to calming music, journal, do whatever you gotta do. And sometimes it's coming out in other ways, and yes, do those things, but also be like, okay, I gotta get this under control. And I don't mean don't tell other people that you're going through stuff, because obviously you should, but I mean, like, lashing out at other people when they don't deserve it and things of that nature. Like, that's not cool. I say to myself included. We all need varying levels of support, and, like, there's sometimes we need that comforting support, and sometimes we need that push to go do something, even if we don't like it. Sometimes that means having a friend go with you to do something that terrifies you, and being your accountability buddy. Sometimes that means bribing yourself into doing it and being like, if I do this thing, I'll buy myself this thing. If I do this thing, I will get to do this thing that I've been wanting to do, that I've been holding off on it, and once I do this thing, I can finally do this other thing. Like, you know what, we gotta survive this. So sometimes, buying those overalls at Old Navy, even though you don't really need them, but you know what, you really wanted overalls for a long time, sometimes you just gotta do it. There's so much that's valid to be afraid of this year. And you know what, I think that while we do speak out about anxiety and mental health and depression and so much else these days, which I'm so grateful for, there's so much that I've learned because people feel confident enough to speak about it. We don't often, like, give ourselves a pat on the back enough for getting this far and doing things that terrify us, and this has been a hard year for varying reasons for various people. You know what, I'm proud of you, whoever you are, whatever is going on with you right now. I know that it's been really rough. I know that your life situation is not going the way that you were expecting it to at this stage and this day, that plans that you had made fell through or just couldn't happen the way that you had hoped them to, and that people you had hoped to see and things you had expected to have done by now had to be postponed, and that this overall ickiness and this overall, like, these things that we are afraid of for ourselves and for our family and our friends, like, that it's a lot to carry every day, and it's a lot to think about every night, or not think about and avoid thinking about. And you know what, and I'm proud of you for doing the best that you can do. I know that you were doing the best that you can do. I hope that you go out and you get yourself some spooky mug and some candy, and pick a movie that's like your speed, and you know what, you have a good Halloween. I'm not gonna watch a horror movie, but I'll probably watch Coraline. I've never seen it. Do you recommend it? Okay, good to know. I think I'll watch that. How bad could it be?